So I make quite a bit of plywood furniture in my shop, and whenever I make a furniture piece, I have to think about whether I want the exposed plywood edge or to cover it up with edge banding. And it got me wondering if there's actually a third option. That's what I'm gonna be working on this week to see if I can make a decorative edge, make it look like exposed plywood, but a little bit fancier. So let's give it a shot. Those of you familiar with the channel will know that I make a whole bunch of patterned plywood. I take the edge grain of plywood and I glue it up into various different patterns, and that's what I'm gonna be starting with today. I'm working on a chevron pattern as my first test. That involves just cutting a whole bunch of strips out of Baltic birch plywood. The chevron pattern is going to be on a 45-degree angle, and so I like to push all of my strips onto that 45 angle, strike a line with a speed square, and that way I just have an indication. This doesn't have to be super precise. It just saves on material. Those ends are going to get cut off, and you might as well maximize the amount of yield out of this blank. So I'm gluing up the face side of the plywood because I want the edge grain to be exposed. So I've tipped all of them forward. I'm gonna lay out all of my glue with a roller and then tip them back onto themselves, being mindful of that 45-degree angle again. Then I'll clamp them up. Well, I have to say I was a little worried about the amount of squeeze out on this blank. I really didn't get a lot. I like to see a little bit more because I'm going to be cutting this into tiny pieces. I probably should have put more glue on, but we'll see how it goes when I cut it into strips. The first cut I'm going to make on this blank is with my track saw and that same speed square. Again, if it's not perfectly 45 degrees, doesn't really matter. The pattern will still match up. You can actually go at any angle that you want. I've seen people do them at 60 degrees and they look really cool too. This is just what I chose. And then I can start passing the blank through the table saw. I'm cutting at a 1/2 inch wide, and so far they're holding together, which is good. With all my strips cut, I can lay them out on my clamps, and I just flip over every other strip, and that forms the chevron pattern. If you want these to match up really well, just make sure that the ends are aligned. So those kind of pointy bits at either end, if they line up, the pattern will line up great. When I was going to do the glue up, I realized that I didn't have quite enough room inside my clamps. I thought for a second about setting them to the side, but I fortunately have a set of 4-foot long Surefoot clamps. I get questions about these clamps a lot because I use them a ton in my shop. I've had them for a number of years. They're made by Rockler, and they're great. I had the Harbor Freight ones before, and those were a good temporary solution, but they started to bend and warp. These ones have held up awesome. I'll post a link down below to where you can find them. I had much better squeeze out on this go round. That's about what I want, is just a little bit above and a little bit below. So I felt pretty confident. I have noticed that when you glue up the second glue up, it absorbs a lot more glue. So a lot of times I'll do 2 coats. I squared off one edge and then ripped a strip. I'm not gonna rip the whole blank apart at this point because I really don't know how this is gonna go. This is all just an experiment. So this is the first one, and it looks pretty good. It's about 1 inch tall and 1/2 inch wide, a little bit wider than the plywood that I want to line. I'm basically gonna resaw this from here. So I'm using my bandsaw fence set at 3/16 of an inch, and I'm gonna see how it goes, see if they fall apart or hold together. Well, I know that may look like a little bit of a fail, but it's actually pretty good. That's better results than I was expecting. I was worried that I didn't have enough glue in that initial glue up, and there's definitely some that are breaking, but most of them are holding. These are actually pretty fixable. I can use just some CA glue and glue them back together. But I'd say I'm really happy. This is really good. I did notice a bit of chatter right here. I might make these a little wider so that when I sand them down, I can get rid of that chatter. But yeah, this is looking pretty good. I'm gonna experiment with making them a bit thinner, see what happens. These are at 3/16, and I'm gonna try and do them at 1/8 inch. They may just fall apart, but it's worth experimenting while I've got the blank to work with. I ripped the second strip a little bit wider than the first one, and then I made it a little bit thinner. So it should, if I have got that chattered edge, I should have room to sand it out. And this way I can see how thin I can go. I don't think I want to go much thinner than 1/8 inch because I don't think it's going to glue up very well, but 1/8 inch would be perfect if I could pull it off.
I cut it on the wrong side. Alright, well, these work.
Well, I completely messed up that first strip, so I cut another one, and I wanted to get a full test to see how many strips I could get out of a single blank. Well, that's pretty fantastic right there. That is 6 pieces out of this one piece right here. This is an inch thick, so that's great. I even think that I can get rid of some of this chatter on the edge by working on my zero clearance on the bandsaw, but there's just so much potential here. I'm gonna test it out on a piece of plywood, but I also realized that if you flip it back and forth, you can get the diamond pattern, which is like that. This would look really cool as edge banding in and of itself. You could just use the diamond pattern like that, but oh man, there's so much potential. Meanwhile, I decided to test out some zero clearance options. I think what's causing the fuzzy edge is the fact that my zero clearance insert in my bandsaw is pretty used up, and I'm trying this hack that has worked for me in the past where I put a thick piece of tape right up against the blade, and it's sort of like an improvised zero clearance insert. Unfortunately, this didn't seem to do much at all. There were still some pretty noticeable fuzzy edges, so on to plan B. I found a piece of plexiglass lying around in a scrap bucket, and I thought this might work a little bit better. Well, I think that's about as good as I'm gonna do. I can't seem to get the fuzzy little bits to go away completely, but they're a little better with the plexiglass, so I'm gonna run with that and just batch a whole bunch out. Well, I am thrilled with how that looks. I was a little worried that the 1/8 inch would be super thin and would get wobbly, wouldn't clamp up nearly as well, but I haven't seen any of that. There's no voids along this edge, and yeah, it just looks great. So this gets me excited. I've got a couple other ideas of things that I can do. The main one is to do the diamond pattern on the edge as opposed to just the chevron, and I think that's gonna look really cool. One thing I'm gonna do is bump it up to 3/4 of an inch so that you can see more of that pattern. So let's try that. I still have that piece that I messed up earlier, and it turns out that that is the perfect width to make 2 strips that equal 3/4 of an inch. So I just went ahead and ripped that piece down to size. Since I'm gonna have to face these pieces into each other, I wanted to make sure that they were very flat and that they didn't have any fuzzies. So I sanded them up on my sanding board. They are very fragile, so I have to be pretty careful. Snapped it. I had enough to wrap around this piece of plywood if I cut all of them in half, so I measured them out and cut them with a chisel. I mean, it just looks awesome. It looks so good. I'm very pleasantly surprised by this, and I can just think of a million projects that I can use this on in the future. One thing that I know that people are going to ask about is this exposed edge. You've got the plywood edge here, and I think I've got a solution for that too. Veneer. So I'm going to try veneering a panel. I've seen people do this before. I think John Peters has done this on his channel, where he'll apply the edge banding and then veneer over the top of the edge banding. It's a really smart way to get a seamless look, so I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to be using contact cement to attach the veneer to the wood. It works really well. You basically just spread it on, wait for it to dry, and then stick the two pieces together. It is incredibly toxic though, so make sure you wear a respirator. Once the contact adhesive has had about 15 to 20 minutes to dry, it's good to go, and then I can apply the veneer. You gotta be really careful with this. The instant it's stuck permanently, so I just kind of roll it out and then use a scrap piece of plywood to burnish the edge. I've rounded over the front edge of the plywood so it doesn't scrape into it, but it does apply quite a bit of force. Well, the veneering works great, and it's hard to be more pleased about that. Yeah, this has got so much potential. I've actually already started a piece of furniture made with this stuff because I was so excited about it. So that will be next week's video. Make sure you're subscribed. Big thank you to Patreon. My Patreon supporters, you guys are the best. I really appreciate it. If you want to join the Patreon, there's a link over here. And if you want to see more pattern plywood videos, I've got a full playlist over here. I'll catch you on the next one.